Hello, my name is John Baitisberger. I am a multi-award winning author from Austin, Texas. Today I am reading from my new book, Dybbuk in the Doorway. It's a Jewish supernatural erotic thriller. So I'm going to read from the prologue, and then I'm going to read a couple of things from All I Want Is to Take Shrooms and Listen to the Color of Nazi Screams, my 2024 Wonderland Award-winning collection. Saturday. The woman sat alone in the small room, her eyes red and puffy from sobbing. Sorrow had nearly consumed her, but grief was secondary now. Now her primary emotion was rage. She felt rage for many things: her situation, the circumstances life had thrust on her, for all the loss she had been forced to endure while pretending her feelings were unbecoming. Stoicism in the face of sadness and anger, she felt she could wash away all of creation. But most of all, she raged against the world and the men who ruled over it. There were always stories of powerful women who bucked against the authority of men, against the circumstances, situations, and stations that were given to them. Some of them were more modern heroes of feminism. Some of them were old, older than the city, older than even the people and their laws. So old that to invoke them was to call upon the bones of the world. She needed that now. She needed the world to groan in pain with her. She needed the earth to shake with her fury. She needed the old stories to protect. No, not protect, punish. She no longer cared about safety or morality. For what use were either in a world that sought to hold her down and give her nothing? Before her sat a small cigar box. She had placed within it things that seemed appropriate. From all of her secretive research done in furtive hunts across many months, she knew only a few items were actually necessary. The research had been done for fun at first, but as she got older and wiser, she knew it was for a purpose. It was not for the childish things, but for power. The power to finally take her place in the world, a place she felt she deserved. But now she only wanted the power to make them pay. She poured the jar of teeth into the box. They had come from children who placed them under their pillows, from the trash can of a local dentist who did not follow protocol, and, when all else failed, from clandestine trips to the graveyard, stolen from the mouths of those who no longer needed them. She set the empty jar aside. One more thing, one more component. She grabbed the pliers and lifted them to her mouth. Opening as wide as she could, she gripped her upper left molar. She was scared of the pain, but her sorrow made her numb to it. Her anger gave her strength. She wrenched, twisting and pulling, dragging the tooth out with all of her might. Blood poured from the wound, pulling in her mouth. She spat a wad of it into the box and added her tooth to the pile. Quickly, she grabbed the candle and began sealing the box with wax, spitting mouthfuls of blood into the now empty tooth jar whenever it threatened to choke her. After several minutes in the near dark, she grabbed a small knife and carved a single word into the box. No, not a word, a name. Lilith. So that is the prologue of Dybbuk in the Doorway. It's available on Amazon and Kindle. It's my very first book on Kindle Unlimited, so if you use that service, you can find it here. Again, this next few things are from my collection. All I Want Is to Take Shrooms and Listen to the Color of Nazi Screams, which is part memoir, part poetry collection, part short story collection. It's a lot of things. We fucked before we faced each other's fears. Not long, mind you, but with enough space for lust to be the entirety of our world. And that burning world would make Bacchus blush as we regressed into primordial beings bent solely to the task of making the other scream. But that world was only the first light, and as the embers grew hotter, other thoughts, impulses, and instincts, like distinct and succinct needs, arose to light the way toward a future cast red in the blood of our enemies. We stood before the throne of God and swore on the core of our beings that we would know no mercy to subterfuge, untruth, or deceit. We were a warrior king and queen who walked the bone-strewn road, path filled with those who would stand in our way and would never stand again. And the threats arise at night when they think we are sleeping, when they think we are docile. But when they come for us, they'll find me ready. I was born with my dick in my hand, ready to take a stand in front of God and the judging angels of hell. I'll ring that bell, be thrown into a cell laughing the entire way into the fire, because I shed no tears for fascist idealists who make lists with my family name, carved in hateful letters upon the door of their houses like lamb's blood, dripping down in condemnation, calling me like Samael to reap. But I don't stop at the firstborn or lastborn. I'm born up on wings of rage to burn them down to the last vestigial vestige until they can't salvage a drop of DNA from inbred ramrod family trees. I leave a deforested nation as far as the eye sees, and all that will be left is the gallows trees blowing in a breeze from which to hang old prejudices and memories of a time when these wastrel racists held on to power as if it could hold them back the way you do. The way you lifted me up to the hungry altar of ambition and told me to go crazy. Told me to torture ears and scream into souls and spit in the eye of gods who were undeserving of the esteem I held them in, and I ate them. I broke their bodies and sucked the marrow out of their resentment down, and it was a hearty and savory meal. It slid out, eager to be done with the weakness of doubt and hesitancy. But no matter how many of these I drained, how many hollow-boned corpses I lay at the foot of your throne, I hunger for more. The press of your flesh into me, begging me to press into you, is the only succor from the vulgar hunger I suffer. Let me taste your skin again. I'll fall into the embrace of your black gaze, drown in it for days, unaware of wasting away, knowing that if led astray, it's to a place that I would want to stay, a place where I don't have to kill and devour to be satiated, a place where I can devour you. That is Marrow. And as I said, this is both a poetry collection, a short story collection, and a memoir. So I'm going to just kind of start up the memoir and we'll take the rest of our time that way. Part 1, 1984 to 1997. I killed my first Nazi at 4 years old. It wasn't art. I didn't discover the joy of this psychotropic kill until much later. Each moment that led up to it was the crescendo of a future lover screaming from around the bend of time, begging for the tantric orgasm that would define our future. Every moment since has been a study in the revitalization of a honed point of ecstasy. The butcher's blade slid along a whetstone, perfecting the slice until even the most anal of rabbi would admit that it was good enough for a kosher slaughter. Not every trip ends in bloodshed, but nowhere in my vocabulary are the words to define the pulse-pounding pleasure derived from making the world a better place while it drips around me like the precipitation from a rainbow-hued loom. When I was born, I could fit in the palm of your hand, but my penis was the size of a man's thumb. In January of 1984, as the water goat chased Fenrir through the star-studded sky, my mother's blood ended its infanticidal war against my in utero occupation. Though there were no casualties in the war, I was ousted from the place in which I had grown far too early, before the leaves fell from the trees and I had fully baked into the child I should have been. I was born into a world that allowed evil to exist as a comfort for those who had money and power, who siphoned off the good and reconditioned its people to accept pain as currency in its stead. My parents, a Buddhist artist who worked with the visually impaired as a teacher and a caterer who demoed canned yellow tomatoes at our local grocery store. They were as incompatible as a couple as my blood was with my mother's, but they strove to create something greater than themselves, and in their insanity, they made me. I spread my arms and I screamed a wordless scream that resounded through the hospital and up to heaven. I am Samael, born in the flesh of a flawed child. I am he who makes the wind whip and the world quake. And then I slept, my dream sleeping with me, waiting to be unlocked by my Celium alarm clocks. A childhood of back and forths with no pillow forts fixated in my memory. A permanence not allowed in the fixtures of my youth when youth is torn between parents who should have never come together and finally realized that truth. It didn't take me long to fall in line with inconsistent rules and reality to understand that reality itself was inconsistent. Why worry about what an angry father thought when the mother forgave? Why deal with the controlling mother when the father's house allowed for freedom that only father's sons were ever given? And when all else failed and they failed to watch a child growing up, I was carted to Sour Lake, to Pine Woods, to the eastern edge of Texas, to stay with grandparents who understood unconditional love better than any human could or would show. Still, carefree was far away, and the pain of life pressed in from an early age, leading me to seek escape wherever I could find it. I looked to books and video games and any egress from truth I could find. I didn't understand until later that truth was a deeper thing, that went deep below the skull and could only be witnessed when unlocking by chemical-induced joy. I was in 3rd grade when depression hit. I imagined a world of grays and blacks where I was as unloved as I felt, where the loneliness and loneliness of being an only child extended through every facet of life. I imagined leaping from the radio tower next to Matthews Elementary and landing on the twisted barbed wire topped fence that surrounded it, not an easy or quick death. Momentum ripped by metal and letting intestines drip down chain links to boiling Texas cement, but it somehow seemed easier than a knife in a bathtub. I didn't know how to tie knots yet. I was in 7th grade when my dog's vet convinced me to spend the night with him and his brother. We watched Lost in Space in theaters while they held hands and giggled. I stayed up late, not wanting to join them in the room they offered to share, postponing what I was afraid would come to pass, Yoshi's Island keeping me safe for a time. I came back from that changed. I stopped dreaming and I began to understand that escapes needed to be deeper than the surface level that the games and books brought me, that I needed something that would devour me completely. I wrote poetry and I took my first trip. I remember my first trip through the hole of elusive reality through the holes, like glimpsing the past through cigarette burns and photos of dead relatives. In Austin, drugs aren't hard to find or attain. A careless word to the right person got you handed the wrong thing. They were more concerned with keeping it weird than they were with safety, more obsessed with image than ritual, than with the sanctity of innocence, until it was so far lost in the mire of despair and weirdness it became your only shield against the world to hide the face that you had lost. What will you had to have a personality? LSD on sugar cubes. I don't drink my tea with sugar, but I didn't know what else to do, so after my parents went to sleep, I microwaved a cup of water, dropped in some chamomile. Tea bag, 1 sugar cube, 2 sugar cubes. It smelled like sleep in waves that came battling at my consciousness, but I didn't want to sleep. I didn't want that dark nothing that led to waking in tears, knowing that the dream still came, but I could never experience them again. The tea tasted like wet leaves and earth, but the night tasted like acrid bile swirling in my throat as I avoided sleep, crossing the street to Matthews Elementary, the school I had gone to in years past. I climbed the old, rusted pipe pillar in the concrete awning over the little building in the back of the playground and watched the stars spin lazily above, wondering when my visions promised would take me away from the serene beauty of misery that enveloped me. A massive cockroach crossed the sky, skittering over stars to examine the moon. I wanted to scream. Its barbed leg hairs scratched at heaven as it took one mandible chunk out the pale cheese that made our satellite, but I didn't. I was too enraptured by the way the sky rippled under or over its feet. The whole of reality, a spinning orb of fluids that we swam in, water separated from water, separating the water from us from the water of them. Hydrophobia sought to engulf me, drown me in terror, but it washed away like a tide in that moment. I was unafraid. I was unsad. I was unassuming as I climbed down the rusting pipe poppies and mushrooms sprouting where my fingers touched, shining with a fluorescent light that lit up the night, caused the roach to scamper back behind the clouds. My feet left footprints in the water of the earth that wobbled and sang the song I listened to every Sunday at church. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. It was a beacon of love and delight that guided my steps that night, the heightened awareness of mind-expanding chemicals that left a chemtrail that was easy to follow all the way to the apartment where I played Rampage while avoiding what had already come. I could smell them in there, bulletproof in their villainy, protecting their shame of their victims. I felt no shame. My world was an organism infested with viral parasites. I was no thing. My skin was absorbing the light of the world, turning milky and opaque as I morphed into liquefied into lucratite flesh. I slipped under the door, no bones to stop on or break. He was in his mattress fortress, protected by pillows and walls and silk sheet used to tie the feet of boys lured in by a friendly smile, plotting his next conquest of flesh, secure in the belief that he could get away with it. But I was there. The watery body's defense made manifest. Flagellum sprouted. I strangled him, pseudopod seeking mouth and crushing pipes. I had no eyes. Or too many eyes. Or not enough mouths to scream pain when I saw intellectually but did not feel in that moment. Without eyes, I watched his brain turn off, oxygen-starved, eyes bulging and bloodshot, uncomprehending of how the world could turn on a predator and leave them broken and alone as he had to others. I woke up on the concrete awning under the morning sky that seemed more solid than it had when it had substance.